Greetings, everyone. This is Hope Preston. I'm with the Washington County Master Gardeners, and I'm very happy this evening to introduce Linda Hardison, who is the director of the Oregon Flora Project and has been since 2005. It's all about the plant diversity in our wonderful state, and Linda's going to tell us all about it, and it's a wonderful resource that we can all use, and I have made use of it a number of times. Linda received her bachelor's from the University of Texas and a PhD in botany from the University of Washington. She is a research assistant professor in the Department of Botany and Plant Pathology. So she's just loaded with information for us, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing what she has to tell us. So Linda, at this point, I will, and just one more point. As Linda goes through this, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we will address them all at the end of the presentation. Thanks so much, and off to you, Linda.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Hope, for inviting me to speak to your group. And it's a pleasure to be able to tell you some about our Oregon Flora program, what we do, and how we can hopefully serve as a resource for people interested in the plants of our state. So Hope, can you confirm that you can see the presentation?
Yes, I'm seeing the title slide.
Okay,
so
great.
Everyone else should be as well.
Great. Okay. Well, let's see if I can get started here. So Oregon Flora is a program that brings information about the plants of our state. Just thinking about the entire state and its varied terrains and landscapes, it's clear that there's a lot of plant diversity in the state. And we serve as a place to gather and organize, to research, and then to share information about all of Oregon's vascular plants. So the vascular plants, as a reminder, are those things that have vascular tissue, but that covers everything from ferns to grasses, trees like Douglas firs, conifers, broadleaf trees, all your herbs, shrubs, all sorts of different kinds of plants. And so pretty much we're covering all of the things except, things like mosses, liverworts, and fungi. So how many are there? There are over 4,700 different unique plants, vascular plants in the state of Oregon. So this is sort of a hierarchy of numbers, mainly just to impress upon folks the incredible diversity that exists in our state. Certainly our natural resources are an incredible treasure that we have living in this beautiful part of the Pacific Northwest. And plants are grouped hierarchically, so you have classification that lumps a lot of things into a plant family, of which we have 165 represented in our state. Think about plant families like the grass family, the pine family, the mustard family, the snapdragon family, and then successively more and more finely divided and finely defined groups of plants. And so that's how we get to over 4,700 unique plants that grow in the wild in Oregon. So once again, Oregon Flora is looking at all these vascular plants that grow in the wild without cultivation. This includes both native species, which make up almost 3/4 of our plant diversity, and non-native plants that have naturalized into the landscape. But notice that really big number of over 10,000 names that we have in our database, because like I said, Oregon Flora is gathering and tracking and sharing all this information. Well, often names change in plant taxonomy and plant classification because new research happens, because somebody might decide what was once one species really can be divided out into several different parts, Or maybe new information says, oh, this really isn't related to what we thought it was. So we keep track of all of these names, and often they can be anything from alternative names or synonyms to separations into finer plant parts, such as a variety or a subspecies. And of these, there are 10,000 names that we track. This is a really valuable service because often different floras, different references may refer to a plant by different names. For example, in the horticultural industry, the thing that everybody knows as Oregon grape, our state plant, our state flower, is often called Mahonia nervosa. But in looking through the scientific literature, Oregon Flora has established that the correct genus name for that is Berberis. And so you can go to our website or look through our books and look for either the name Mahonia, which you might be familiar with, or Berberis, and you'll find that same information. So we've had lots of changes because in these, which is why one needs a flora, because science marches on, and because taxonomy is especially a very dynamic field. And it all comes about because life is always changing. You know, there are new plants that are still being discovered. Climate change is impacting the plants that occur and grow in our state, where we're seeing now new plant species that we didn't used to because it's warmer and drier in places, or maybe more fire is happening that brings in a different suite of plants. So all of these things are adding to, plus all the research that gives more information about how plants are related and how we can refer to them, makes for lots of changes, and it's important to track all of these things. We do this in both book form and in an online form, and it's certainly important to be able to do this and reflect our digital capacities, you know, by being in the 21st century and having access to websites where we can keep things truly up to date. Unlike in printed books, it's not as easy. And so that's a wonderful resource that Oregon Flora is able to share with the public, so that we all have the most current and the most accurate information. So I've sort of alluded to why one might need a flora. So first I'm going to define what a flora is. So our program is Oregon Flora. We started out as being called the Oregon Flora Project. And the program started in 1994 with the goal of creating a new plant reference for the state of Oregon. So I've already told you the types of plants that we are concerned with: the native and non-native plants that grow in the wild, vascular plants that grow in the wild in Oregon. And what that information does is it's really comprehensive about where a plant can be found, how to identify it, and all of its details about its structure, where it grows, what kind of other plants it's associated with. And this stuff is really critical and important information because it helps us understand what plant diversity exists. As I mentioned, you know, climate change is bringing about a lot of notable changes in our world. And this is one way that we can track that information, and also importantly have a sort of some benchmarks as to what has been here through time. And then we can also see how it changes through time. So plant information is really relevant to every person, I truly believe, because plants touch every human being, every living organism, actually. You know, it's plants that produce the oxygen that we all breathe. They provide us with food and fiber and habitat, as well as enjoyment and a sense of place. And so all of this information has its roots, but it's based in a scholarly effort and in a rigorous effort in a flora, which is this body of information that we gather and can be then applied to so many different fields, whether it's building materials, whether it's ethnobotany and humans' relationships to plants, whether it's land management. And that, I think, land management issues are one of the most critical things that a flora is needed for. Land managers, and this covers the whole spectrum from federal agencies who own more than half of the state of Oregon, such as the Bureau of Land Management, the Forestry Department, or the U.S. Forest Service, to gardeners, such as yourself. You are also a land manager because you are choosing how to steward and address the plant life on a piece of property. So all of these degrees of land management can be informed through accurate knowledge about plants. And it helps us make good decisions, whether you are managing thousands or tens of thousands of acres, or whether you're managing a 10 by 20 foot garden bed. So the way our flora looks is given in this example here. We are producing a 3-volume series of books that contain all of this information I have described. Volumes 1 and 2 have been published, and we are closing in and on finishing volume 3. After 29 years of all of this data gathering and production, we are looking to have volume 3 in people's hands in 2025. And this represents all of the plants of the state in their details. So what you might find if you open one of these flora books is like seen here on these pages. You have, first of all, detailed descriptions about each plant species. And that's in this text right here. And that gives all of the measurements, the ranges of sizes or shapes that one might find for some feature of a plant. Again, it has habitat and ecoregion information, distribution, what elevation range does it occur in, when does it bloom. And then we also have over on the left-hand side is an example of ways to identify plants. Because one of the things that you can do with a flora is you can go to the area that the flora is relevant to, grab any plant that you see, and ideally be able to use these books, these references, to get you to know the scientific name of that organism that you picked up. And that's done in this book format, in this very traditional form called a dichotomous key. And you're given a suite of options of characters, and then you choose the set that best matches your unknown plant, and then it tells you if which number to progress to, and then you go to the next set of pair of character suites. And that's why it's called a dichotomous key, because you have 2 choices, and then it will ultimately lead you to your scientific name of the plant. We also have, for Oregon flora, we've put in little maps, distribution maps for each plant species. And if you can look closely at one of these, you'll see that the ecoregions are shaded on these, and that gives you an idea for the precise location of any particular species with those dots. And these have all been confirmed observations with a herbarium specimen. And it tells you which ecoregion it occurs in, which gives you a sense of what you might expect to find if you're wandering about in different areas of that ecoregion. You'll also notice these beautiful illustrations. The artwork is something that really sets Oregon flora apart, because the last flora that was published for Oregon was updated in 1961. So over 60 years old, and it had no illustrations. And so certainly some of us think more visually than with written words. And so these artworks really not only give the sort of gestalt of what a plant is by being capturing all of the features different from what you might find in a photograph. That's why we use illustrations as opposed to photographs in our book, because it really is the idealized plant that might make a little more evident some of these key characteristics that let you know what species you're looking at. And so that's an enormous help in using and making useful a flora, as well as being incredibly beautiful. So another thing that our flora does is that we help people understand the value and the relevancy of plant diversity information. So we put some context around all of these facts. And believe me, I really can, I think, assert that every drop of ink in those descriptions that I just showed you is data. And so there's no fluff. This is not prose. You know, these are just fact after fact that have been researched and checked and confirmed. And so all of those descriptions, what we refer to as those floristic descriptions, are data that we have curated. We have carefully examined this. And it's just, you know, it's an incredible amount of information. And so we want to make that, you know, understandable and relevant to as many people as possible. And so we've added in the front of each of these volumes chapters that give a context for that. I've given some examples here. In the upper left is an appendix from the chapter about landscaping with native species in volume 2. And you can see this has a whole bunch of names and information about how and what might be appropriate plants to use in different settings in a garden setting. And then the pictures, the spread of the photo with the photographs, is a chapter about plant-insect interactions, also in volume 2, that talks about pollinators, moths, and butterflies, and some of the stories around these plant-insect relationships. In volume 1, we had a really sort of keystone chapter about the ecology of Oregon that sort of sets the framework and provides a lens through which Oregon Flora views and shares its information. Volume 3, our upcoming book and final book of the Flora series, is going to have chapters about ethnobotany, about how indigenous people of this area have related to plants through time, and also a chapter on climate change and the impacts on the plant life and plant diversity of our state. So right now, let's just play a little game. If you were to be blindfolded and then spun around and you were taken, the blindfold was taken off and you were looking out on this landscape, how would you know from what you see where you were on the planet? So think about that. And some of the things that strike me that would help me, you know, sort of piece together where I was is I would look at the whole scope of the plant life. So there's these grasses, there's these conifer trees, some of them look like junipers. The soil looks rocky, there are these big rocks, it's pretty dry looking. Looks like a sunny day or slightly overcast day, but it's pretty open, so there would be a lot of light. Kind of not real lush, you know, the plants are pretty well spread apart. So all of these pieces are giving me some information. So another option, you know, compare that to the blindfold being taken off and you are now looking at this sort of setting. So what sort of things might clue you in as to where you are in this place? Again, I'm looking at the vegetation. How dense is it? How diverse is it? What different things am I seeing? It looks like my feet are probably wet where I'm standing here. There's broadleaf trees off in the distance. A completely different place than the first image that I showed you. And so if some of you on this image guessed that you were in Eastern Oregon, are Central Oregon. You're absolutely correct. This is in Jefferson County. And this image was taken from the Willamette Valley down in Lane County. And so some of the features that you might have been ticking off in your mind are actually the pieces that help us define what an ecoregion is. And so I use this as a little mental game to demonstrate that many of you probably already have this sense of what comprises an ecoregion and how that can help you understand the plants that you might find or expect to find in an area where you are, and vice versa, how the plants that you observe in an area can inform you about what ecoregion you're in. So thinking about what helped us, play this little puzzle game, some of the features that help define an ecoregion are both the biotic, what plant life is there, what forms does it take, what sort of plant communities does it occur in, as well as the abiotic or the non-biological factors such as light, soil types, potential moisture levels. So these together help us define and delimit ecoregions. In Oregon, in Oregon Flora, we define these, I think it's 11 ecoregions. And I'm just going to take you on a little visual tour of some of these, just as a reminder for those of you who have explored the state or who haven't ventured all the way to the northeast corner or the southwest corner in a while. So looking at the upper left, we'll sort of go clockwise, and you can see some images from the Coast Range. Then looking at some of those big trees, those are ponderosa pines, something you would find in the East Cascade slopes and foothills. The lovely meadow scene, that oak savanna, is Willamette Valley territory. And that's something that I'm fortunate enough to be sort of plopped down in the middle. I live close to the Finley National Wildlife Refuge, and this is a site I have the fortune to commute past every day I go into work. And so it's a beautiful part of the Willamette Valley landscape, which you Portland people see portions of as well. In the lower right corner, that's a view of the Wallowa Blue Mountains ecoregion, the Strawberry Mountains. And those have a different geologic origin than our volcanic cascades, which also combines to provide you with some really unique plants that sometimes you just don't find those species from the Wallowas in our Cascades or the East Cascade ecoregions. At the bottom is the Basin and Range, an image from Malheur Lake as part of the Great Basin. A reminder that's the area in the country and sort of the West that doesn't drain to the ocean. And so it allows for these playas and these bodies of shallow water to build and then drain off as the summer heat comes up. And so you have a lot of sort of ephemeral lakes and wet playas that appear and make some beautiful areas that are really rich in wildlife as well. Over in the lower left is a beautiful scene from the Cascade Mountains. We also have the Coast Range Mountains between the Willamette Valley and the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. And then another area that sort of looks like a spider within sort of sandwiched between the northeast corner of the Blue Wallowa Mountains and the East Cascades, are the lava plains, where clearly the recent volcanic activity of the past millennia has really impacted and made a sort of new landscape that has a lot of basalt in it. So with all these beautiful pictures, hopefully that gives you a sense of some of the diversity that the landscape in combination with the plant communities creates to make these really unique places. And these are really great, again, sort of frames of reference for how we can think about the plant life and the plant communities that occur in the state. So this is, again, just some more beautiful pictures that I wanted to share with you that Oregon Flora has of some of the plants that occur. And the volumes represent which of the 3 volumes that these groups of plants are in the publications. So we have conifer trees of all different shapes and sizes. And also amongst the monocots are lilies and grasses and sedges, and orchids are also part of the monocots. In volume 2, some of the big hitters in that group, we've divided them alphabetically by plant family, include the carrot family. There was a lomatium there in the lower left, and the sunflower family, which has 11% of the state's plant species in it. So it's a huge group, and was a real landmark to accomplish that. The mustards are also a big group that are in volume 2. In volume 3, this upcoming volume that we're working on, you have things in the saxifrage family. And interestingly, Oregon is one of the sort of key centers of diversity for this plant group. And so what that means, what that manifests itself as, is you have a whole lot of diversity, a whole bunch of different genera, as well as the species within each genus represented by this group in Oregon's habitats. And often these are found in moist places and have really these lovely, delicate little flowers that are really fun to pay attention to. We also have things that were in the figwort family, or the Scrophulariaceae. And I said formerly because, again, remembering that taxonomy is a really dynamic field, researchers have taken this group that, when you think Scrophulariaceae, think of snapdragons, think of monkey flowers, like the examples here, penstemons, all of those things. Well, they decided, nah, this isn't going to work in one family, and broke it down into 5 different plant families. And so again, that makes for a lot of name changes, and we're very lucky that all of them are in the last half of the alphabet. So that was a stroke of luck on our part. Another group is the rose family. A lot of beautiful plants, more than just roses and service berries, that are in this lovely family that also has some culinary and wildlife reserves and uses. So those are just some pretty pictures that I wanted to share with you that also really help, I hope, sort of highlight the diversity that exists in Oregon, and how what a task it is to keep track of all of these things, and to then share this information in a way that people can really use it. So as members of the Master Gardeners Association, or an interest in this, which is why I assume you've tuned into this webinar, is how all of this information can relate to some of your interests in gardening or landscaping. So I've been talking, 4,700 plants all over the place, lots and lots of details you have. Well, what does that do for me? And again, it's back to bringing home the relevance of this core information to different applications, such as gardening or landscaping. When it seems so popular to want to garden with native species. Well, why might you want to do that? Well, some suggestions are, I think the first one that comes to mind is, well, it belongs here. If a plant is native, then it's going to be particularly adapted to living in this place. So let's take one step back first, however, and sort of address that question of what is a native. So it's actually kind of a question that has a squishy answer, because, it's a bit of, maybe it's a bit of a hedge, no pun intended. It sort of depends on what you're defining as a native. But some of the features that I think are pretty universally accepted as to what lets one call a plant species a native for an area, first of all, is what's your frame of reference? And, we can be talking about, is it native to North America? Is it native to the Western US? Is it native to Oregon? Is it native to the Willamette Valley? Is it native to the Tualatin watershed? You can define your scale to any level, and that gives you a sense of, okay, these are the plants that are delimited based on floristic knowledge, the kind of knowledge that comes out of the flora. These have been documented as occurring here and growing without cultivation. So some other characters, once you've defined your scale, well, what makes something native? Does it evolve, and has it occurred without human intervention on the landscape? So that also, again, takes a frame of reference. What's your frame of reference? Because we typically are saying we will call a plant species native if it has been documented here prior to European settlement. So that clearly has some limitations on it, and a sort of Eurocentric approach to it, and that has its liabilities, I admit, but we acknowledge that and say this is a place, this is one way to define how we're determining from our culture what a native species is. So, does it exist without human intervention on the landscape? That is, has it been occurring in our frame of reference of time and place without having been planted? Does that plant persist over multiple years or plant generations? Is it reproducing by itself, whether this be by seeds or vegetatively? Is it spreading through some sort of rhizomes or stolons or something like that? So all of these features help us define, put a definition on what we're going to call native. And that's how we've been approaching it within Oregon Flora. So what are some of the advantages of using native plants in your landscaping? Well, the first, as I repeat myself, is they're designed to be here. And so that can lower the maintenance that you need to provide for a plant. When you look at the soil types, go back to our understanding of an ecoregion. When you look at the soil types, the non-biological features in the place you're planting it, and then think about what else might occur there, that gives you a sense of how you can use these plants and they can better thrive. Another thing is that we're all part of a web of life, and native species can help support native wildlife. We don't live in a vacuum. And so when you have native plants that can provide food and shelter for insects, then the native insects can also help pollinate these native plants. And they also provide food for the birds and the amphibians, which are then eaten by the larger mammals, and on it goes. So all of these things help create a healthy ecosystem and a healthy environment for all levels of the web of life. It also helps maintain genetic diversity, because often in the cultivated world of plants and ornamental plants, they've been designed and bred to be consistent, because everybody wants to get the same thing when they pull it off the shelf. And so that does limit the amount of diversity that exists in the genetics of these plants. And so when you have a native species, especially plant material that's been collected from the wild or propagated for a limited number of generations, you have a whole lot more genetic diversity. And I think that just helps create a more robust ecosystem. And again, it also gives you a sense of place, where we are. Just like you recognized you were in Central Oregon, or you recognize you're in the Willamette Valley, that tells you and anchors you to where you are on the land. And I believe that is an aspect that has great value in our work, both as scientists and as lovers of nature and plants. So some of the ways that you can best use native species in your gardening or landscaping is to first think about, well, why would I want to do this? What am I trying to achieve? And these are probably things that y'all have thought about quite a bit and experience and work with. Are you looking to make, have all sorts of things? Do you want splashes of color and texture and shape and size? Well, you can achieve some of those with all kinds of species, both horticultural and native species. You can also achieve a lot of landscape and ecosystem functions. This can be everything from providing resources for pollinators or butterflies or wildlife habitat if you have a bit of acreage or that you're butting up against a park or something like that. And you can also achieve some ecosystem services that are helpful for us humans too. Like you can plant a bioswale, plants that in a soggy area, and lately it's been really soggy, so you're finding those areas where is it not well drained. So what sort of plants would thrive in here, like rushes or some sedges that can help slow down water flow and hold that water on the landscape a little bit longer. Or maybe you need a privacy hedge and you can use some willows or some shrubs, some vines, even some big hardy lupins to create a really diverse and interesting wall of greenery, as opposed to cherry laurels or box hedges or something like that. So there's so many different things that have color and variety and texture that can provide a lot of these things, whether it's a landscape function, an ecosystem function, or just what brings you pleasure, because I think that's a huge part of it. It's a whole lot more fun to tend and work in something that you enjoy as opposed to seeing it as a chore. So choosing the level in which you want to be engaged with your landscape is going to be a ticket towards success. So some of the things to consider, especially if you're working to integrate natives into your landscaping. First of all, I'll back up a bit and say it doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of situation. I firmly believe, and I think can readily assert, that one can combine traditional cultivated plants as well as native species into a planting, into a landscape. And you just need to be conscious of the water needs, the nutrition needs that these plants have, because often, at least in the Willamette Valley, our native species are accustomed to drying out and going dormant in the summertime, as opposed to pouring lots of water on it like a greenhouse. So making sure that there are some compatibilities is one key, that you can mix these things. So you don't have to feel stressed out like, oh, I want to have everything in my yard native and it's too hard to do and I can't figure it out. Or, oh, I can't do that at all. So it's a both and world. It's not an either or world, in my opinion. It's a both and world. And I think a good place to start, as to especially looking at, well, how can I make a native part or my whole garden, focus on native species, is go back to that ecoregion stuff that we talked about. That's why I sort of spend some time on it. That's your frame of reference. That's your reference plant communities. It's your reference habitat. And when you look at that, as opposed, look at the land, the setting, the miniature ecoregion that you have on your property, and then let that inform you as to what plant species would be appropriate and would be most likely to thrive in your garden. So often it's tempting to go to a garden store, go to a nursery, look at the beautiful flowers, the beautiful pretty colors and say, ooh, I want that one, and walk out with your arms full of plants. And then it's like, well, where do these live? How am I going to make them thrive? But let's turn it on its head and instead start with where you are. And you might have to have good visioning practice, and some of the tools we're going to talk about in just a second are going to give you those resources, give you the ideas and the pictures and the maps that help you envision what your land is, what your plot can be in terms of a habitat or an ecosystem, and then say, okay, for natives, here are some choices that would be appropriate. Here are some shrubs that I can use as sort of an anchor for this space. And here's some large trees that I only want one of those, but that's going to be the most appropriate thing. So start with what you have. Look at the habitat that exists there, and even the microhabitats that exist that can create these little climates. For instance, do you have a garage wall, a south-facing wall that can sort of reflect heat back? That might inform you on how you might want to maybe add some rocks, create a little rock garden, microclimate, micro ecosystem there, or and then select appropriate plants, or consider the other moisture areas or other features that you can integrate in, whether it's a constructed feature such as a wall or a sidewalk or a garage wall or something, or natural features such as maybe you have a great big old oak tree or a red cedar in your yard or a redwood. Work around those things, and then think about those reference ecosystems and the plant communities found there that can then inform you as to what might be good choices. So, well, this is all lovely information, Linda, but how can I get my hands on it? And the easy answer for that is to go to the website, OregonFlora.org. So what I'd like to do in the next few minutes is take you on a little tour of our website. So fingers crossed, the live demo is gonna work here. Let me change to another website. So, okay. Hopefully everybody is seeing the website now. This is our OregonFlora.org website. I think Hope put the URL in the chat at the very beginning. And so what I'd like to do is just show you some of the features on here. When you go to the website, one of the easiest way to unlock all sorts of information is in these little white boxes. You can either do it right here on the home page and do exactly like it says and type a plant name in here. It's always up in the upper right corner of our navigation tab as well. And so because we really want to make everything available to everybody, you can type in and find information with scientific names or common names. So you don't have to just know Latin. You can choose, enter anything, whether it's bellflower or lotus, and you can see that it pulls up common names that have lotus in it, as well as all of these scientific names. So if we go to a scientific name, okay, then you're taken to a profile page. So everything you search is going to take you to a profile page that tells you everything we know about that particular plant. So here's one such profile page. But if you're paying attention, if you're still awake out there, you might say, hey, you typed in lotus. Why does it say Hosacea gracilis? Because this gets back to that all of those names, those plant names that Oregon Flora keeps track of. And you'll see here that Lotus formosissimus is a synonym of what we recognize as Hosacea gracilis. So whatever you want to call it scientifically, it's also called seaside lotus. You can see all sorts of information over on the right-hand side in this column We also have a beautiful sort of glamour shot of the plant and an interactive map. So all of these dots have information behind them. So it's not just static dots on the map, but anytime you click on any one of these characters, you get a whole page about that particular record, information associated with that record. So think for just a second about the data management implications of this. We have almost 2 million records that have, with each one of those, all of this type of information. And it's all parsed out into little squares in a database. You know, think about your, this massive interactive and database. And this is how we keep track of things and how it lets us slice and dice the information, which then lets us create all these way cool tools and ways to retrieve that information and those data that really help it become usable. So every time you see a scientific name or a dot on a map or something, you're going to be able to access all of that information, whether you're looking at it about a picture, about a herbarium specimen. Here down at the bottom, we have herbarium specimens. All of these have all of that information associated with it, which we've databased. So I've just told you you've got distribution information. You have beautiful photos that also tell you everything about where that photo was taken. You have herbarium specimens, not only from Oregon State University here in Corvallis, but from around the Northwest and even some national herbaria as well, because we're part of this network of websites that share plant diversity data. And then we also have distribution. So this is that information that was from the example of the books that I was telling you. And look closely and you will see that there are also little glossary terms that I can click on any of these words that have a stipple underlining and pull up a definition. So that's another way that it can be. We're really trying to help make all of this information accessible to a broad audience. You don't have to be, a scholar to get through these agreed upon. I agree there. The vocabulary can be challenging in botany, but that's what makes it so precise. That we help you get through that. So once you've looked at, you can look up any name. You can look up daisies. You can look up lotus. You can look up Wyethia angustifolia, whether it's a scientific or common name. You get all the information from these plant pages. And so some of the other things that we have, I'll just walk you through some of these. Some of our resources, we have a whole bunch of tutorials on how to use the tools that I am about to show you. So this can be in whether it's a video or whether you like text better. We try and help you have some resources to learn more about them. We also have a bit of a blog page and various events that you can read about different topics that come up related to plants. So under publications in our tab, remember that this website is actually a digital version of the Flora. And so this sort of explains and gives examples of our flora and also how you can keep it up to date. Because remember, it's a lot harder and slower to make updates on printed things. And so we have some errata and we have different documents online that help you cross-link between these two books that we have, soon to be 3 volumes as well. So let's look at some of the tools that Oregon Flora website offers. One is about identifying plants. So, how it's sort of like the dictionary conundrum. How do you use a resource to spell something if you don't know how to spell it? Well, we figure that people can, if they find a plant that they don't know what it is, and they're out on a hike or something, and generally have a vague idea of where you are. And so we have this tool, which you simply drop a pin by clicking or tapping on a map as to where you are. And then when given that, you can pull all of the resources from Oregon Flora, all of those millions of records that we have, and we tell you what's been found in our database around that point. So from that little pin I dropped not far from Portland, 1,363 plants are in our database, unique plants species, as having occurred there. That's a pretty hefty list, but you can then go over in this left-hand column and choose whatever character you recognize about your unknown to help winnow it down. So say I found some herb, it wasn't a tree or it wasn't a fern, I know. So my 1,300 plants now just got narrowed down to 900. And so every time you select, and you don't have to choose any particular order or any combination, it's just whatever you recognize, then you can winnow your list down until you get to a point where you can picture ID. So we're down now to 15. You can probably even narrow it down some more. But every time, again, you click on a scientific name, you go to a profile page, and then you can look at this if it loads. And okay, maybe it's stuck. And like that page that I showed you earlier, you can see, does the map match? Does the description match? Do the pictures look like what I found? And that's a way you can identify key that makes it super easy for every level of expertise and knowledge to identify plants. Okay, so another tool is the inventories. And that, I'll just show you the landing page for that. It's really, like the title says, places in their plants. So we've accumulated all the lists and references that we have about a particular area, a given place, and we then compile those so that you can pull up any list and look at the plants that have been identified. So this is a great way to get a start on a list if you're going on a hike and want a good idea about what you can see there, or if you've been to an area like along a river or a campground or something, and you find things that you aren't sure about. This gives you a sort of a mini flora of all the plants that have been discovered in that area that you can then use to do the identify plants process too. So some other tools, we have a great GIS-based mapping tool. We are also the public face of the Oregon State University Herbarium. So this is where all of the herbarium specimens and the information from this great resource at Oregon State University is exposed and shared with the world. So that's another sort of detailed part that ties in and both uses and shares information with all of our floristic information. And so one that's probably of interest to you guys is the Grow Natives tool. And this is, let me put it here. So this is similar to a way to identify things that you have an interest for. So remember, we were talking about how can I garden, or how can I create a garden that's going to have appropriate plants? Well, you can think about things like, well, what am I trying? What kind of conditions do I have? Well, I have something that it's all soggy in the wintertime. So if I select that, then I'm going to see from the 300 plant species from across the state that we have in this tool, which of those taxa have that sort of characteristic. Maybe I want something that's going to provide some ecosystem services, that's going to be a caterpillar host plant. And so I've narrowed the list down some more, and you see some more options. And again, you can do things like, how tall of a plant do I want? Do I have, partial shade? All of these different characteristics. And then this gives you a sort of a suite of plants that might be appropriate for your particular setting. Just like we have profile pages for our general plants, we also have gardening profile pages that focus on all of the things that are relevant to cultivating and managing these plants. So that includes what other sort of plant communities or plant palettes these might be appropriate in, as well as a little description and lots of pretty pictures, and then a link back to that core profile page that I showed you before. So these are some of the things that Oregon Flora does. It's clearly a way that we apply and make relevant to a broad audience all of this super technical, almost geeky kind of scholarly information, and relate it to people in ways that really help, we hope, enrich your life and add to your ability to appreciate these resources. So I'll just point out a couple of the other resources. This great website, we're always working to improve it. Some of the things that are going to happen is we're also working to develop a rare plant guide, an interactive one. So sort of in the flavor of the Grow Natives tool, we're going to have that as a resource about rare plants of Oregon, which is something that government agencies and restoration groups are super excited about, and we're partnering with some of them. But this is, these are the floras that we have. We also, this is what I wanted to show you, have a wildflower app that can be downloaded that doesn't require an internet connection. So if you go out hiking or something in a remote area, this gives you the same information that drives the website, which is derived from our books in your back pocket. One other piece is that our program, though we're based at Oregon State University, we are completely a self-funded program, meaning we provide all of our funding for salaries, health insurance, operating expense, server hosting. And so if you find that these resources are helpful for you, please join our team and help us keep these resources available for you. So with that, let me go back to I'll try and go back to the website. I just wanted to acknowledge the amazing people who make this happen. And here's our team, our small but dedicated team of workers. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much.
Well, Linda, this has been very, very interesting. I think I know what I'm doing tomorrow. I think I'm just going to spend the entire day playing an Oregon Flora. I'm just incredibly impressed with how much depth and interactivity there is, and how many different ways you can go in and the different things that you can explore. It's really an impressive piece of work.
Thank you.
There was one question that came in asking, is there any, if we wanted to see a hard copy of this, are there any libraries or where is it available other than buying it from a bookstore?
What's the one in Portland? The main library downtown, the Multnomah County Public Library.
Yep.
Has it in the reference section. And I would also encourage the master gardeners, if you have a lending library or a reference library, maybe that's something that you'd like to add to your library. I know a number of the Soil and Water Conservation District offices, watershed councils, hopefully all have copies of these volumes, but the public library does have, the last time I was up there a few years ago, they do have them in their reference section.
Good to know. And no other questions have come in, but several. Oh, here's a question just came in. Mm-hmm. Could you please put your slides grid back up?
My grid? The grid of
the
slides?
Grid of all of the slides.
Sure. Let me see if I can do that. Yeah. Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they don't all display at once, but I guess she could specify if there was a specific one she wanted to see. And another question is, You know, I'm sure you're familiar with the backyard habitat certification. Do you have any sort of cross-reference in your materials to that?
No, we don't. That is on our to-do list, is to get the Portland plant list linked in as a filterable option in the Grow Natives tool, because I believe the backyard habitat is driven by the PPL, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes. So I know we've talked about it, and it's just pulling our resources to actually make that happen. But that's a great idea, and would be a really logical thing to be able to filter on, to know which plants would satisfy that list. I can also add, just a plug, it was Metro, your Portland area governmental agency, that provided some of the key funding for us to launch this Grow Natives tool, and we're really grateful for their support.
Oh, wonderful. And could you move your slide so that it goes at the later ones? Yes. Okay, and somebody just asked, are there any opportunities for volunteer field work associated with the Flora?
We don't have at the moment a whole lot of things going on with volunteer field work. As we really push to finish the Flora, we're pretty focused right now on the sort of data crunching and gathering. Some places to tie into that would support our partnerships would be with the Native Plant Society of Oregon. Typically, you know, many chapters, and I know you've got a really active Portland chapter, many chapters, I guess every chapter hosts field trips in you know, the warmer season especially, and those typically, people affiliated with those will make species lists for what they see at a place, and then they share that with Oregon Flora, as we share information with them. So we're great partners with NPSO. So that would be one way you can contribute. And then also another branch that NPSO helps with is the Citizens Rare Plant Watch program. And all of those are instances of organizations that we've developed partnerships to share information. So we bring in information from the public and make it part of this public curated data set.
Okay, excellent. Those are all of the questions. So again, thank you for this very much. And we're now going to move on to our chapter meeting.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.